Beloved brothers and sisters, I stand before you today not with a theory, but with a testimony. There was a moment when I died, when my spirit left the confines of this body, and I was taken into a realm beyond human imagination. In that place of glory, I encountered Jesus face to face. His eyes were fire, his voice was love, and yet his words pierced me like a sword. Beloved, let me take you into the mystery of the first encounter. When I speak of death, I am not speaking of imagination or dream, but of a reality where the body grows silent and the spirit crosses into eternity. In that holy moment, all the noise of this world faded, and only the presence of the Lord filled the atmosphere. I was carried into a place where time does not exist, where heaven breathes, and where every answer is hidden in the light of Jesus. It was there, standing before him, that my soul trembled. His gaze penetrated to the deepest part of my being, and his love washed over me like a mighty ocean. Every fear, every ambition, every hidden weakness melted away in the brightness of his glory. And yet, his face was not stern with judgment, but radiant with compassion, as though he had been waiting for me to finally come to the place where he could reveal the mysteries I had long overlooked. He looked at me, and with the gentleness of eternity, he began to speak. He said, "Many on earth live their lives without ever touching the true treasures I have given. They live with lips sealed, hearts heavy, and spirits bound, because they do not understand what I gave on the day of Pentecost." His words shook me. Suddenly, I realized that even though I had prayed, even though I had preached, even though I had spoken of the Spirit, there was a depth I had not entered. Jesus was not pointing me to human wisdom, but to the supernatural gift of tongues. He said, "This language is not of man. It is the voice of your Spirit speaking directly to my throne." It is the key to mysteries, the language of heaven on earth. As he spoke, I saw in a vision the moment of Pentecost, the rushing wind, the tongues of fire resting upon the disciples. I saw them transformed from fearful men hiding in shadows into bold witnesses shaking nations. He said, "Do you see what happened? Their weakness became strength. Their silence became thunder. Their prayers became weapons that pierced the darkness." My heart was undone. How often we think of tongues as a ritual, as a strange noise, as something optional. But before Jesus, I saw it as a fire that sets the world ablaze, a current of power flowing from the throne into human vessels. Then Jesus revealed something that shook me even more. He said, "When you speak in tongues, you are not only praying mysteries to God, you are releasing authority that the enemy cannot decipher, a code he cannot break, a sound he cannot resist. Demons tremble, angels are dispatched, and the heavens open at the utterance of what you call strange syllables. It is the breath of my spirit woven into human sound." Suddenly, I realized this was why the devil hates tongues, why confusion surrounds it, why so many Christians neglect it. It is because this gift is a weapon, a divine connection that makes weak men unbreakable. In that moment of death, before the living Christ, I understood that this was not about tradition, not about denomination, not about intellectual explanation. This was about life and death, heaven and hell, victory and defeat. He showed me that to neglect this gift is to walk with a sword still in its sheath while the battle rages. But to embrace it is to carry heaven's fire in your very breath. When I returned from that encounter, I could no longer treat this lightly. I knew that the secret Jesus revealed to me in that place of glory was meant to awaken his people. Speaking in tongues is not man-made. It is God's strategy, heaven's voice through us, and the bridge between our weakness and his limitless strength. Beloved, when Jesus began to reveal to me the mystery of tongues, he made it clear that this is no random sound, no emotional overflow, no accident of speech. He said, "This is the language of heaven that I have given to my children, a language untouched by corruption, untouched by human pride, untouched by the limits of intellect." As I listened, I felt like a child learning to see the world again. All my assumptions, all the thoughts that tongues were merely a prayer exercise, fell away in that holy moment. He showed me that when a believer opens their mouth and allows the Spirit to flow, they are not mumbling nonsense. They are speaking the vocabulary of eternity. It is a tongue birthed not in the human mind, but in the very breath of God. I remember how Jesus' voice carried both authority and tenderness when he explained this. He said, "When Adam fell, the language of man became confused, corrupted by pride and divided at Babel. Nations could not understand one another, and unity was shattered. But at Pentecost, I restored what was lost. I gave one language again, not of the earth, but of my Spirit, that unites my children, no matter their tribe, their nation, or their culture." Suddenly, I saw multitudes from every continent, every color, every generation lifting their voices in tongues. Though the words sounded different to the ear, in heaven they rose as one song, one language, one voice before the throne of God. That is the miracle of tongues. It bypasses the divisions of men and takes us into the unity of the Spirit. Jesus also showed me how limited human prayer can be. Our minds grow tired, our vocabulary runs out, our understanding of God's will is often small. But when the Spirit prays through us in tongues, there is no weakness, no limitation. He said, "Your mind may not understand, but your spirit speaks directly to me. And when you pray in the Spirit, you are praying my will without error, without confusion, without fear." Oh, what a shock to realize that when I groaned in tongues, it was not emptiness. It was the very strategy of heaven being released through me. Angels move at that sound, mountains tremble at that utterance, and destinies are shaped through those hidden prayers. In that vision, I also saw how tongues becomes a bridge between the finite and the infinite. Our human language is like a tiny vessel trying to hold an ocean. We can describe pain, but cannot capture its depth. We can describe love, but cannot explain its fullness. But when we yield our tongue to the Spirit, the ocean itself flows through us. It is heaven speaking through clay, eternity touching time, God filling man with his own voice. I wept as I realized how many times I had prayed with my understanding and fallen short of God's heart. Yet how every time I prayed in tongues, his Spirit had interceded perfectly. Jesus whispered, "Never despise this gift, for it is my Spirit praying in you." It is a holy partnership between your weakness and my strength. When you speak in tongues, the barriers of language intellect, and human effort collapse, and heaven itself touches the earth through your mouth. After this encounter, I could no longer see tongues as optional. I understood that this is heaven's language entrusted to fragile men, and when we honor it, we step into realms of prayer, power, and intimacy with God that human words could never reach. To neglect it is to silence the Spirit. To embrace it is to let God Himself speak through us. And once you see it this way, you can never go back to empty prayer again. When Jesus opened my eyes to the realm of the Spirit, He revealed something that shook me to the core. He said, when you speak in tongues, you do not only pray, you shake the unseen world. As those words came forth, I saw a vision like lightning striking across the heavens. I saw demons huddling in terror, covering their ears, as though the sound of tongues was unbearable to them. I saw angels lifting their swords, suddenly charged with fresh command, ready to move at the voice of a believer who allowed the Spirit to speak through them. In that moment, I understood that tongues are not just spiritual whispers. They are thunder in the spirit realm, a frequency that both hell and heaven must respond to. I had once thought that praying in tongues was simply for personal edification, to strengthen my soul when I was weary. But Jesus showed me it is much more than that. He said, when my people speak in tongues, they release authority that shakes the atmosphere around them. Darkness loses its grip. Chains break without human effort. Principalities scatter like smoke blown by the wind. I realized then that every time a believer prays in tongues, they are not only building themselves up, they are enforcing the victory of the cross in their environment. It is a battle cry, though it may sound weak to human ears. To the powers of darkness, it is unbearable fire. In the vision, I saw a Christian on their knees, weary and silent in prayer, with their understanding almost defeated by fear. But the moment they yielded to the Spirit and began to pray in tongues, the atmosphere shifted. A ring of light surrounded them. Angels stood guard. The demons that had once pressed close fled with screams of torment. And I heard the Lord say, "Do you see? The sound is foolishness to men, but to the kingdom of darkness it is devastation. For these are not words of man. These are words of my Spirit. And they carry the weight of heaven's authority." I also witnessed how angels respond to tongues. Jesus showed me that when believers pray in the Spirit, angels are dispatched with assignments. Some carried healing, others carried provision, others carried deliverance. The words of tongues became like divine orders, coded instructions released into the heavens, and the angels carried them out with precision. No demon could intercept them, for the language was holy, sealed by the Spirit, untouchable by the enemy. Suddenly, I understood why tongues had been so misunderstood and mocked. The enemy cannot afford for Christians to realize its true power, for if they did, they would walk in unshakable authority. Jesus said to me, "This is why I told my disciples to wait in Jerusalem until they were clothed with power." It was not eloquence in preaching that would shake nations, but the fire of my Spirit released through their tongues. I saw Peter, once a fearful fisherman, stand up after being filled with the Spirit and speak with boldness that pierced thousands of hearts. That boldness was born not in intellect, but in the upper room, in the tongues of fire. As I stood before him, trembling under the weight of this revelation, I realized that tongues are not optional for the believer who wants to walk in victory. They are a divine weapon. They terrify hell, they mobilize heaven, and they transform the weakest saint into a warrior. From that moment on, I could no longer pray in tongues casually. Every time I opened my mouth, I knew I was releasing heaven's arsenal, enforcing Christ's triumph, and shaking the unseen world with sounds that may confuse men, but make hell tremble. It is not noise, it is warfare. It is not foolishness, it is fire. It is not empty syllables. It is the roar of heaven through human lips. When Jesus revealed to me the mystery of tongues, he showed me something that pierced me deeply. He said, "This gift is not only a weapon against darkness, it is also a healing stream for my children." As he spoke, I was carried into a vision where I saw people burdened with wounds that no human words could touch. Some carried the weight of grief. Others were bound by memories of shame. Others were sick in their bodies. And still others walked with broken minds filled with tormenting thoughts. And then I saw what happened when they began to pray in tongues. It was as if invisible hands reached inside them. Their hearts were being stitched together. Their minds cleared. Their bodies shook and life returned to them. Jesus said, "Tongues is spiritual surgery." It goes where no doctor's hand, no counselor's wisdom, no preacher's words can reach. It cuts, it heals, it restores, because it is my spirit moving beyond the limits of man. I wept as I realized how many people carry silent wounds that no one can see. Outwardly they smile, but inwardly they are bleeding. Outwardly they look strong, but inwardly their hearts are shattered. Human words often fail in these places. We can encourage, we can comfort, but the pain is too deep. Yet when we pray in tongues, the Spirit Himself enters those hidden chambers. He knows the brokenness that cannot be spoken, the sorrow that cannot be explained, the confusion that cannot be named. And with every utterance, the Spirit begins to rebuild, to restore, to breathe life where death has lingered. Jesus showed me how tongues also renews the mind. He said, "The thoughts of man are corrupted, polluted by fear, doubt, and lies. But when you pray in the Spirit, I pour living water over your mind. I wash away the dust of the world, the heaviness of sin, the whispers of the enemy. I give you the mind of Christ through this hidden channel." And in that vision, I saw weary believers rise from their knees after praying in tongues, their eyes clear, their faces radiant, their hearts filled with fresh faith. The confusion that once clouded them was gone, and in its place was divine clarity. Then He took me deeper and showed me how tongues touches even the physical body. He said, "Your body was formed by my Spirit. Do you not know that the same Spirit who raised me from the dead dwells in you?" When you pray in tongues, you stir that resurrection power. Sickness is confronted, weakness is replaced with strength, and life flows into every cell. I saw a sick man lying on a bed, frail and weak. He had no strength to pray long prayers, no ability to form eloquent words. But as he whispered in tongues, it was as though waves of light flowed through his body. Muscles strengthened, bones aligned, and his skin shone with life. That was the power of tongues. An unseen medicine from heaven, stronger than any remedy of earth. Beloved, Jesus impressed upon me that we must not treat this gift lightly. It is more than a sign. It is more than a token. It is a divine therapy for the spirit, soul, and body. Every time we yield to the Spirit and allow tongues to flow, we are entering into God's operating room. He does what we cannot do for ourselves. He reaches the places we cannot even describe. He heals the wounds no one else knows exist. After seeing this, I could not remain silent. I understood why Paul said, "He who speaks in a tongue edifies himself." To edify is to build, to strengthen, to repair. That is exactly what happens. God himself builds us from the inside out. And so I urge you, do not neglect this gift. When you feel broken, pray in tongues. When your mind is clouded, pray in tongues. When your body is weak, pray in tongues. For in those moments, the Spirit is performing divine surgery, and you will rise renewed, restored, and made whole by the hand of God himself. When Jesus spoke to me about the gift of tongues, his words carried a weight that pressed upon my soul. He said, "In the days that are coming, the faith of many will be tested. The earth will shake, nations will tremble, and men's hearts will fail them for fear. But my children who know how to yield to the Spirit, who pray in tongues, will walk in a strength not of this world." For tongues is not merely a gift. It is my strategy for the last days. When I heard this, I was stunned. I had always thought of tongues as a personal blessing, something to encourage the individual believer. But Jesus revealed that it is far greater. It is a shield, a compass, and a well of power for the church in the final hour. In that vision, he showed me the earth covered in darkness. I saw confusion spreading like a fog, and multitudes stumbling as if blind. The voices of men were full of contradiction. Leaders spoke one thing today and another tomorrow. Truth was buried beneath layers of deception. Many believers struggled, not knowing whom to trust or what path to take. But in the midst of that chaos, I saw a remnant praying in tongues. Their lips moved with sounds the world could not understand, but above their heads was a light. As they prayed, the fog lifted before them, and a clear path appeared. Jesus said, "Do you see? Tongues is the compass of my spirit. When the world is confused, I will lead my children by this hidden channel. When they pray in tongues, they are tuning to my frequency, and I will direct their steps." Then he showed me how tongues would be a source of protection. I saw arrows of the enemy flying through the air, arrows of fear, sickness, temptation, and despair. They struck many, and some fell. But over those who prayed in tongues, I saw a shield rise, invisible yet unbreakable. The arrows shattered against it like glass. Jesus said, "The enemy cannot interpret this language, nor can he penetrate it." When my children pray in tongues, they are hidden under my covering, surrounded by the armor of heaven. What a revelation this was! To think that when I yield to the Spirit, I am not just speaking mysteries. I am clothing myself in God's protection. But the Lord did not stop there. He revealed that tongues will also be the reservoir of power for the end-time church. He said, "In the last days, miracles will flow not from great names or titles, but from those who pray much in the Spirit. Tongues will keep them filled with my power, overflowing with my fire, ready to heal the sick, cast out demons, and proclaim my word with boldness. I saw ordinary believers, young and old, rich and poor, laying hands on the sick, and they recovered. They spoke words of wisdom far beyond their education. They discerned dangers before they came. And when asked the secret, each one testified, I prayed in tongues, and the Spirit gave me strength. Finally, Jesus impressed upon me the urgency of this gift. He said, the hour is late. Many are asleep. But those who pray in tongues will remain awake. They will not be swept away by deception, nor crushed by fear. They will walk as overcomers, shining as lights in a dark world. As he spoke, I felt both awe and holy fear. The gift we often treat as small is actually one of heaven's greatest preparations for the days ahead. Beloved, I returned from that encounter convinced that tongues is not optional. It is essential. It is not a minor gift for the overly spiritual. It is the lifeline for every believer who desires to stand strong in the shaking to come. If we embrace it, we will walk in clarity, protection, and power when the world collapses in confusion. This is heaven's strategy for the end times, and those who take it seriously will not only survive, they will shine. When Jesus had finished showing me the power, the depth, and the mystery of tongues, his final words were not a suggestion, but a call. His voice was filled with both urgency and compassion as he said, tell my people not to neglect this gift. It is heaven's breath in their mouths. Those words struck me like a hammer upon stone. Heaven's breath, that was how he described it. Not a tool crafted by man, not a mere practice of religion, but the very breath of God flowing through the believer, keeping them alive, strong and connected to his heart. I realized then that tongues is not only a privilege, it is a responsibility. To neglect it is to silence the Spirit. To embrace it is to walk hand in hand with the divine. In that vision, I saw multitudes of believers. Some stood weary, struggling in their faith, weighed down by burdens. They carried their Bibles, they attended church, but their spiritual lives were faint and weak, like lamps with little oil. Then I saw others whose lips moved in tongues, not just occasionally, but daily, as a rhythm of life. And the difference between them was like night and day. Those who neglected the gift were often anxious, confused, and powerless. Those who embraced it, it glowed with light. Their steps were firm, their prayers carried fire, and their hearts were overflowing with peace. Jesus said, this is the difference between walking with natural strength and walking in my Spirit. My people must choose. He showed me further how tongues transforms an ordinary life into an extraordinary journey. I saw a mother praying in tongues over her children while they slept, and unseen angels were stationed at the doors of her home. I saw a young man, tempted and weak, fall to his knees and begin to speak in tongues, and strength rose in him like a flood, breaking the chains of sin. I saw an old man with failing health, whispering in tongues, and his soul was renewed with joy and vigor beyond his years. Jesus said, when my children yield to this gift, they are no longer bound by the natural order. They are lifted into the supernatural. They touch heaven every day. But his words also carried a warning. He said, "The tragedy of my church is not that they lack power, but that they neglect what I have already given. Many cry for revival, yet they will not open their mouths and let my Spirit pray through them. Many seek strength, yet they ignore the well within them. The fountain is already inside, but they have left it untapped." These words cut me, for I knew they were true. How often we wait for God to move, while heaven is waiting for us to release what He has already placed in us. And so, His final message was an invitation and a command. He said, "Let every believer make tongues their daily portion." Do not wait for crisis. Do not wait for weakness. Pray in the Spirit every day, and you will walk in continual victory. This is not for a few, this is for all who believe. Then he lifted his hands, and I saw rivers of living water flowing out of the mouths of his people, spreading across nations, healing lands, breaking chains, and preparing the church for his return. When I returned from that encounter, I could not remain silent. I knew I had to tell others this gift is not small, it is not strange, it is not optional. It is heaven's breath entrusted to us. To neglect it is to live beneath your calling. To embrace it is to rise into the fullness of God's design. Beloved, Jesus is calling his church. He is calling you to pray in tongues daily, to let the Spirit speak, and to watch your life, your family, and your world be transformed by the power of heaven's own voice flowing through you.